questo è
Sì, sì,
è l'inglese.
ci stanno parlando il canale inglese.
Canale inglese, seconda console.
A posto, signor?
Allora, il canale inglese di una cabina, poi English, one test,
Ok.
English.
Ritorni un attimo in italiano? Non la sento.
In più l'altro.
succede? Che lei è il tuo riferimento assoluto sul palco, quindi è lei la persona che poi darà i microfoni quando servono. Sostanzialmente uno, perché parlano uno alla volta. Lei ha
Magari ne mettiamo, ce ne abbiamo due, ne mettiamo due a zona, insomma, sinistra e destra. Oppure uno.
sempre a lei vanno dati, capito? Cioè lei che...
Sì, quello poi è un altro problema.
Buonasera.
Good afternoon, good evening, and just a brief technical announcement. We shall begin in a few minutes. I know that people have been queuing a little bit to come into the theater, so that's why we've been giving a few extra minutes so that people could actually make it inside. What's going on? What is going on? I worked hard all my life. I looked for freedom. I tried to abide by human nature at best, by privileging merit, fostering competition, opening new markets, creating opportunities, and fighting against the evil produced by a pervasive state and its crooked officers. I've been running a business for almost 20 years now, fighting to have success, to make sure that innovation and progress would triumph, and working hard to achieve the goals I set to myself, and achieving the necessary means to satisfy my desires and contribute to the development of the planet. I always wanted to be the man I became. But everything is very different from what I had in mind. I thought the day would have arrived in which I could live happily, but that does not seem to be the case. I am just running after money, banks, taxes. If I get distracted for a second, they'll take everything away from me. I've become the servant of my own power. It was supposed to make me free, but instead it's a cage that I don't seem to evade, not even when I'm on holiday. Now, if I were an isolated case, that would be fine. You pay the price for your actions. But here, everything is falling apart, and no one can pay for this. How can I build anything if everything is falling apart? How can I feel fine if everyone is scared and afraid? They say that's the crisis, but the crisis should be just a phase. And this has been going on for years. I was young when it started, and now I'm getting older, and this cage is becoming tighter and tighter every day. I can no longer wait. It's impossible that there is no way out, that I can take my life back into my hands and change something of it. But I don't see a way out. I find no alternatives. I keep speeding and speeding, but I'm just repeating myself. Where did I get it wrong? What did I do wrong? I was supposed to be happy. But to be quite honest, this is a dog's life. I think the first thing is that you should get rid of this sense of superiority towards other animals. That would help you in realizing that you are not different and that these days have nothing special. If your grandparents thought that there were no alternatives, when in Europe it was normal for poor people to die of curable diseases, for women not to have a right to vote, or for the white man to enslave anyone with a different color of the skin, well, if they thought so, probably we would still be living in the past. And when it comes to the present, I'm afraid you are not smart enough to understand that a world where everyone only does his own interest cannot function. A world where everyone abuses of what he or she has. You turned off your brain to the point that you don't realize that at the root of your catastrophe are your own illusions. The illusion to believe that making money and markets were the only possible ways to achieve collective happiness. It's been for at least 100 years now in places like this. We've been repeating that what is really criminal is to open a bank, not to rob it. But of course the problem is that too many people seem to have forgot this. Do you know what grandparents told their grandchildren 100 years ago? Marta, do you want to tell him? Well, yes, maybe we could start redistributing work and working times, meaning going to the heart of inequalities. And so somehow try to make the real contradictions surface. And so, for example, when it comes to the distribution between profit and wages, and redistribution would help us in reducing the social pressure of the industrial reserves, basically. But we need a revolution in order to do that when it comes to the labor market, in order to get rid of the Italian Jobs Act or of the Loi du Travail and of all that was produced on this front in the past 25 years in Europe. But if those are the conflicts that need to arise, well, in order to do this, we need to go back to the working place, and we need to be political once again. Well, it feels to me that you're really not respecting what I do and all the hard work we do in order to create jobs, because you don't create work. It doesn't exist. You have to create it. Well, I'm afraid that you're a little bit confused. Work is not simply being employed for someone else, and it's not even just a way to accumulate money. Work is the activity through which we all contribute to the material and spiritual development of our societies, or at least that is what it should be in theory. If we were just speaking of a number of actions aimed at accumulating wealth for the benefit of just a few, well, then what kind of freedom? How could that make us free? Because freedom is not something that is on sale. It's something that we build and we defend with others. Let's just take a normal citizen doing her job. And let's imagine that just out of the blue, she decides to take action to support thousands of people who arrive every day in a state that does not intend to welcome them. Andrea, what do you think of this?
Mark Twain used to say, well, you'll be told about the dignity of your work. Well, that's bullshit. When it's a dignity, you find it in your leisure time. And it was a journalist from San Francisco Chronicle that asked him about the quotation. And Mark Twain answered, well, I was saying that in your leisure time, in your free time, you can think about a job that would make you happier, even though it's not paid for. And this makes me think that when we have worked with the activists of Baobab experience, we work with the communities trying to help migrants who are here temporarily in Rome, where institutions fail to help them. And I've seen that in the Greek islands, in Ceuta and Melilla, in the Scandinavian countries, in the Arctic Circle, where men and women sort of try to play their part and improve the lives of their fellow men. Can this be viewed as work, or I don't know, really? It's something which is meant to build something. So when you sort of demolish a wall, that's work. If you bring down the borders or the frontiers, that's work. Well, you have to build solidarity, reception, culture, and by the same token, it is work when you sort of convert mathematical figures, statistical figures into human beings with their histories, with their faces, with their background, with their dreams. So the job of an activist can be extremely useful to build a different Europe, the one we sort of dream of and would very much wish to be. And that is what you feel when you sort of go to camps that are managed by associations and groups that work with migrants and who are not employed to try and give an answer to migration. We know pretty well that we can't talk about invading a country or other. We want to work on receiving and accepting the migrants, and Europe could be certainly more responsive to that and welcome them. And I think that this kind of job could be far more interesting and exciting than a legislative work, which quite often fails to understand the reasons for which people migrate and the reasons for which you should work for Europe when Europe receives and welcomes these people. Well, but work is a commodity, isn't it a commodity? Well, I'm glad you have doubts. I'm always in doubt. I don't know what to do, but at the end of the day, you do something. Yes, I've always known what to do, and I continue to do that, but it doesn't seem to work any longer. So I seem to have lost ground. My feeling is that you're there sitting and thinking about today's life with the eyes of the past. That's why you don't go ahead, you don't make any progress. Try and look out to the future. What will our grandchildren say about a system where 1% of the population owns 95% of global wealth in tax havens, hidden in tax havens, while millions of people are forced to queue up to get a free meal, a system which allows the massacre of thousands of human people that cross the desert and cross the sea, hoping to be queuing up for a free meal, where the expression of human wastes refers to men and women that are drowned in a sea of plastic waste. It's a time of contradiction and risk. This is not a time of surrender. It's a time of courage and commitment. Come with us and join us.
Europe is perhaps one of the richest culturally advanced sectors of the world. What happens in Europe is of great significance. For centuries, Europe was the most savage place in the world. Go back to the 30 Years' War in the 17th century, probably maybe a third of the population of Germany was slaughtered. The 20th century, of course, a total horror. Finally, that seems to have ended with the European project. That's a step of extraordinary significance. If that internal savagery of Europe, which of course was exported to the rest of the world, that's imperialism, colonialism, if that's contained and Europe becomes a progressive force in the world, as it began to be with the European project, spearheading welfare state measures and so on, that's of enormous significance. If that breaks up, it's a terrible disaster for the world. So what happens to Europe today? I think it's poised at the brink of breaking up on the one hand and moving forward on the other. It's a choice that will have to be made internal to Europe. There are forces in both directions. There are positive elements, I think. As we said before, DiEM 25 is the most promising of them that I know of. the developments in, say, the elections in Barcelona, the Podemos, others that we know about, they could pave the way to a revival of the European project, which would overcome the very significant flaws and build upon the promise that has partially been achieved and could go forward. Or it could break up and we could return to a world that is not likely to survive, frankly.
Noam Chomsky, che è nel board di advisors di
I'm Chomsky and the board of advisors of DiEM25. Welcome to you all.
Non siete i soli 27 capi di Stato europei.
Also 27 leaders of the EU came to Rome today to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the treaty. 28 leaders were supposed to be here, but then Theresa May did not show up because she decided to accelerate the Brexit process. You know that the British have developed themselves so much that they know how to prepare a cappuccino on their own, so they no longer need foreign workers. But there were also a lot of people who took to the streets today asking for Europe to change, because you have a Europe where 1 people out of 3 is at risk of poverty, is a Europe that is not functioning. A Europe that opens its doors to tax evaders and shuts its doors to migrants is a Europe which does not work. One where we have 123 million people at risk of poverty and 300 super rich guys is a Europe which does not work. Europe like this is not up to its task. I am not up to this task as well. To make an example, I am not Europe is not fit for its job as much as Barbara D'Urso is not fit to run programs on Italian television. And you might know that also Paola Perego, another Italian anchor woman, and was just been fired because she wasn't up to her task just as much as Europe was not. Marine Le Pen has been recently saying that speaking of Italy, that the only way to Marine Le Pen and Salvini were saying that Italy could only be saved if we shut Italy's doors to foreigners, and I agreed with them when they said that, but I thought that the moment was to actually shut our borders before Salvini came back home. But in fact, instead what the leaders are saying that is that we can go on with business as usual and that we have to be patient. We shouldn't worry because things are going to change. Never mind if we have workers in Italy earning 500 euros a year. Anyway, we will wait. Some say that we should insist, for example, in Italy with the voucher system as a way to pay people instead of a normal labor contract. But they're saying that they're now going to abolish vouchers. But our Prime Minister said that's too bad because that was a good way to pay to give a little bit of pocket money to unemployed people, and that's too bad because now we're going to be forced to give Mr. Alfano a proper labor contract. But anyway, what we think is that we should not insist instead with the neoliberal policies that financial elites love so much, and that the social democratic political parties that put those elites in power seem to be so glad about. Now, but we also think that the solution is not nationalism, and the solution is not a decree that has been passed by a Ministry of the Interior about the fact that asylum seekers should be put to work while they're waiting for asylum in exchange for reception. But we all remember what happened in 2011 when Berlusconi finally went down after 20 years. We thought that we were going to be able to cast our vote, but the Goldman Sachs and President Napolitano decided that because we were attacked by Goldman Sachs, then we needed as a new Prime Minister Mario Monti, a Goldman Sachs man. So we all know why we find ourselves in the current situation, but tonight we will try to focus on how to get out of this situation. DM25, Lorenzo Marzili and Yanis Varoufakis.
Buonasera a tutte quante, buonasera a tutti quanti.
Good evening, everyone. 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, I started trying to do my part to change a Europe which we don't like. At the time, it was the 50th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. I used to live in the most multicultural neighborhood of London, in a city, a town that represented that type of society, of possible society, that nationalists would like to destroy. And I lived in a neighborhood that symbolically, in a place that symbolically were represented this multicultural dimension. It was an abandoned factory who used to belong to a British guy who ended up in jail, who had put that abandoned factory into the hands of an Italian entrepreneur who had then given it to a Brazilian guy who built an illegal gym inside this factory. And then this guy sub-rented a part of that abandoned factory to myself and Nicolò Milanese. And that day we were looking at the images of the celebrations for the 50th anniversary of the Rome treaties, and by looking at those images on television, we decided to begin the adventure of European alternatives. Since then, we witnessed many crises. These have been 10 years of constant systemic crisis: debt crisis, financial crisis, economic crisis, refugees crisis, crisis in Ukraine, and so far and so forth. And times really seem to be accelerating constantly, but the most important crisis is perhaps the political crisis. They kept telling us that there is no alternative to the current system, and now that this system is proving to be totally inadequate, what options do we have? We can only pick between two alternatives that are equally wrong. On the one hand, you have the establishment, who is insisting with a business as usual that is leading Europe straight into disintegration, and on the other hand, bitter fruits produced by this establishment, a xenophobic right-wing nationalist wave. And there is a symbiotic relationship between these two options, as we always say with Yanis, because the establishment creates the policies that allow for the nationalistic rebellion to happen, but it is symbiotic also in terms of the sense of fear that these two options convey. On the one hand, fear for the failure of the policies, and on the other hand, the fear for the migrants, promoted by xenophobic nationalists. And that is why we decided to entitle tonight's event "The Time of Courage," because we believe these are days when we need to be brave, to have courage. We believe that in order to build a different scenario for our continent, we need different policies. But they are not extraordinary policies. They are policies that make sense. Are those policies against the system? Well, if the system is one where 6 people sit on 50% of the global wealth, and this is not just a figure. Marchionni, the CEO of Fiat, made in one day the amount of money that one of his blue-collar workers makes in 20 years. So if this is the system, if the system is that of tax havens, if the system is one where the only result of the crisis is to try and exploit those who are worse off than us and are trying to flee war, well then, if this is the system, our policies, yes, are against the system. But our policies are policies that make sense, that they are simple and possible. What can we do in order for these policies to become a reality? Well, first thing we can do is to look at the policies that have created the current European disintegration. People always talk of the Europe of austerity, the Europe of technocrats. But if we try and understand what's behind this austerity, these technocrats, what we find behind the scenes of all these is those very same elites that are trying to profit out of the crisis, those very same elites that tried to impose national policies that, in the case of Greece, would destroy the attempt to find a different way out for Greece and for the entire Europe. They did nothing in Italy. That was absolutely the same.
Quindi dietro alle politiche si cela il potere politico.
So behind policies, what you have is political power, not something abstract. And if we look at history, what did our grandparents have to do in order to build a different world? Well, in order to build a different world, you needed a workers' movement, a feminist movement, an anti-colonial movement. And we wish now to build the movement that can take Europe out of this present. We are not there yet. Today proves that we are still not ready, that we are still not up to the task, because today in Rome we should have had hundreds of thousands of people taking the streets to express all that third space that we wish to build from Portugal to Poland. And so within 1 year time, we hope that we can get to a point where we can offer a different kind of image to our European fellow citizens. And how we can do all this will be at the center of tonight's event, because if by quoting Gramsci, we are living in the days of the interrealm, then our role should be that of bringing about a novelty, of building a system that we can be proud of in the years to come. And in order to do this, we need courage, ambition, and vision.
Yanis.
Buonasera, Roma. Good evening, Europe. All roads led to Rome today, except for the Pope who went to Milano. The great and the good descended upon this splendid city to celebrate the European Union's 60th anniversary. By the way, there's another anniversary today. Today it's Greece's National Day. Χρόνια πολλά, Ελλάδα. Millions of Europeans have been glued, or not exactly glued, have been watching on and off their television screens, watching our leaders celebrate. And they would be justified to ask a question: What exactly are they celebrating? They use a great achievement, but the European Union is at an advanced stage of disintegration, and the European idea is in retreat everywhere. And the very same people who in this city today are celebrating it from the position of the deep establishment are responsible for the disintegration of the European Union. We are here to demonstrate, we did today, and primarily to get down to work, to answer important questions about how to restore Europe, to do what Noam Chomsky said, to turn Europe into, once more, a progressive force in the world. By the way, we at DiEM25, we loathe, we hate borders. And we've proven this because Noam Chomsky, who is an American and lives in Boston, is a member of the coordinating collective of DiEM25. Europe is an idea. It knows no borders, and we do not respect borders in this continent. So we've come here, effectively to fulfill a promise that we first issued in Berlin on the 9th of February 2016 when we set up DiEM25. One of our great colleagues, who is not here tonight, but he's a member of the coordinating collective of DiEM25, Brian Eno, the musician, in his speech in Berlin said, "Folks, we don't know exactly what it is that we're doing. Start cooking, a recipe will follow." Well, the recipe is here, and it's the European New Deal which we're launching today here in Rome. It is our answer to the question that the European establishment has not bothered to answer. What should we do to stabilize Europe, to stem the progress of the nationalist international, which is feeding on the instability and the constant deflationary and recessionary forces in this continent, and bring hope back? This is the question that we are answering by means of the European New Deal. The European New Deal is not about the European Union. It is not about the Eurozone. It is about Europe. We squeezed our minds for a year now to come up with answers that concern not just countries like Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Greece, the Eurozone countries, not only countries that are in the EU, but also countries that are on the way out of the EU, call me Britain, as well as countries that never entered the EU. At the very same time, the European New Deal expands in two dimensions. One is the temporal dimension. We have proposals that can be applied tomorrow morning. Well, maybe not during the weekend, but on Monday morning. Yeah? On Monday morning. They could be applied tomorrow, on Monday, first thing, between 9 and 11 in the morning. And these would be policies that utilize existing institutions in Europe. The ones we have, we may not like them, we may be very critical of them, but there are ways of redeploying them, technical ways of redeploying them, in order to stem the tide of misanthropy, to stabilize Europe. Because stabilization of Europe is an essential prerequisite for beginning to build the recovery on top of it. And then we have a second batch of policy proposals of what should happen in the middle term, in the medium term, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, and we finish off with institutional changes that should come in the long term, and in particular, of course, the replacement of all EU treaties by a democratic constitution that will result from a constitutional assembly process in which every European should be part of. I am not going to give you a technocratic explanation of the various policies that we are proposing. It is a technically difficult document, but at the same time it's not inaccessible. let me just say a few words. We are proposing policies that would effectively tame finance and create a public digital payment system that would augment the degrees of freedom of the Italian government, of the French government, of the British government even, not just for the Eurozone, and which at the very same time would operate as a mechanism for minimizing the shock waves from a potential disintegration of the euro. We are proposing that which needs to be done to save the euro. But that mechanism is also a mechanism for absorbing shocks that may happen, may hit us, hit our societies, our people everywhere, because of the establishment's denial that may very well lead to a disintegration of the Eurozone. We have policies for funding the innovators and those, especially young people, who innovate on green transition, green energy, and green technologies. It's all about linking the mechanisms, the mechanics of central banks, not just the ECB, the European Central Bank, but also the Bank of England, the Bank of Denmark, with public investment banks. We have policies for providing the basic goods that Europeans need in every community, from Latvia all the way to Lisbon, and from Ireland all the way to Cyprus, in order to ensure that maintainers, those people who maintain their communities, the nurses, the teachers, the sewer workers, the people who change the telephone lines, who do things that are of an older technology, but which are essential for preserving our societies and our communities, the maintainers are funded, while the innovators are also funded. We are proposing policies about how to share in the prosperity that the robots can produce. We do not want to set a universal basic income against the existing social welfare state. So we are proposing very innovative institutional interventions that will allow us to create a set of circumstances so that we can all share in the returns to capital. And finally, we have a comprehensive proposal for resolving the toxic and particularly debilitating euro crisis, something that we have not done as Europeans since 2008-2010. Now, this is what we need to do. How on earth do we do it? Great ideas are necessary, but they are not sufficient. To give them strength, we need to be able to acquire a degree of power. We need, for the European New Deal, to acquire a capacity to set aside, to push away the denial and the constant resistance of a deep establishment caught up in a spiral, a negative spiral of authoritarianism, anti-democratic behavior, and austerity. We shall say a few more things about how this will happen. But already in a press conference yesterday, we made an open call to all political parties around Europe, to all civil society organizations, to transnational networks, to join us in giving legs to this European New Deal, to develop it with us. It needs more development. Every good idea needs to be an evolutionary one, in order to be able to take this European New Deal to a ballot box, to an electoral center near you, near every neighborhood in the European Union and outside the European Union by 2019. Allow me to finish off by asking a question that everybody has. I'm sure everyone has in this room at the back of your mind. Is this not utopian? Well, allow me to redefine it as realistic utopia. It is the only alternative we have to a dystopia which is dragging our continent towards a postmodern 1930s. Unless we take the spirit of solidarity, of tolerance, of liberty, of combining technological innovation with social justice, and we package it in a set of policies that has a capacity to influence the electoral and political process everywhere in Europe, we are not going to be able to answer the nationalist international, which is the natural repercussion of a deep establishment that has no idea of what it is doing. Allow me to finish off by saying that in Britain, those who voted for Brexit were not racists. There were some racists. Do you know where they were mostly? People who said enough. Enough of this establishment. We went around Britain and campaigned against Brexit. And we said to them, in this EU, against this EU, stay with us to fight against the EU. But you know what they thought? These people here, all of us, you cannot win government. If we vote to stay in the EU, it's a vote for the establishment. And we are so angry. We want to claim our countries back. You know what? The answer to this from progressives in Europe is not your racists. You want your country back? It's not to be condescending to them. It is not to look down upon them. It is to say to them, you're right. You deserve your country back. But to gain your country back, to get your city back, to get your region back, we need collectively to sort out some problems that are common to us, which you cannot solve at the level of your region, your city, and your country. Just like climate change. We cannot sort out climate change in our own country. Same applies to public debt, banking crisis, low investment, and poverty. Italy cannot solve these problems on its own. Britain cannot solve these problems on its own. Greece cannot do it. Germany cannot do it. This is why we need to Europeanize the solutions to these, so that each nation, every municipality, can get its own country, region, and city back. So, allow me to finish off the way I finished off in Berlin on the 9th of February 2016. It is time to shake Europe. Compassionately, gently, but very firmly. Thank you.
Come cambiare democraticamente l'Europa? Ne parleremo adesso con i nostri.
We're going to democratically change Europe. We're going to talk with our guest tonight, but you will be able to interact with what is happening here on stage with DM Voice, and there will be two, Christina and Dana, that are going to explain what is DM Voice to you.
Hello, it's fantastic being here, and thank you for being here, everyone. I'm here to basically invite you to participate in this event from now onwards, and I'm very, very excited to launch here tonight DM Voice. DM Voice is an ongoing art platform running simultaneously with DM25. It is an initiative which focuses on the political dynamics of contemporary art. Our intention and vision is that art plays an integral role in determining not only the means, but also the ends. Not only the medium for conveying the policy, but also for shaping the policy itself. We want to create events which will appeal to Europeans who want to engage with politics using alternative formats and contexts. The project builds on the idea that people's voices are the active material of DM25, and that each person's actions, thoughts, ideas, voice, however small, shallow, loud, or deep, can have an impact on how we operate cooperatively and in extent as citizens of Europe. We want to generate a voice which engages in a conversation with the political. This horizontal approach and exchange that we are aiming for is reflected in our logo. I don't know if yeah, it's behind me. It's a voice wave consisting of smaller parts which form connections, a highly dynamic and context-sensitive system which comes together to become the word voice. Our aim is to actively contribute to the policy making of DiEM25 and to be heard as a voice. We are generating the voice of DiEM, like a collective consciousness, a patchwork of actions, thoughts, ideas created during the events in relation to DiEM's 6 pillars: the European New Deal, which was just presented here tonight, transparency, refugees and migration, labor, green investment, a European constitution. Furthermore, we aim to initiate a critical dialogue with people who attend these events, you. For this, we are collaborating with artists and creative researchers to devise systems drawing from artistic practices, critical practices, and research in art, but also science, in order to orchestrate and this immaterial exchange between DiEM25, the people who participate, and the corresponding artists. In this way, we aim that DiEM Voice will contribute to embedding the DiEM25 events in the debate and dialogue which informs DiEM25's policies. Our aim is to cultivate these aesthetics of valuing people's attendance and leaving some space for reflection and discussion during these events. Now, Cristina Penna, with whom we have closely collaborated in the past months on this project and who is largely responsible for putting this idea together, will explain to you how you can actively help us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Cristina Penna and I am a performance practitioner, a designer and a researcher. So my work is based around participatory performance, the processes of working with multimedia, with audiences and with materials. I have been working as a creative consultant with Danai and the DiEM team to set up DiEM Voice, as Danai just said, and we hope that you will all contribute to this tonight. Very often in conferences, there is not enough time for questions in the end. The question period cannot extend for more than a few minutes, and some of the participants leave without being able to express potentially valuable contributions and responses to the events, which can generate conversation. Because in most cases, it's not only the questions, your questions that are being answered by the speakers, but also the potential conversation that your questions can generate between you in finding answers for our questions. What we aim to do tonight with DiEM Voice is to form a feedback loop between the foyer space, your space and the stage. And this is how the spatial contraption is going to work. So throughout the evening, you can post your questions, thoughts or responses on Twitter, WhatsApp, email or SMS, and we have them all projected there. For all the speakers, after the speakers or throughout the event, or for the speakers that have already talked, we will be creating an analog social media platform in the foyer by actually printing your input and displaying it out there. So you will be able to see the process also of what is happening in the foyer in almost real time, because Danai is going to be going around and taking photos of what's happening in the foyer, and we're going to be projecting them there. Because transparency of the process is indeed key to what DiEM25 is aiming to achieve. Now, upon exiting, you will see your displayed questions. So when the event is finished, you will go out and the foyer is going to be filled with your questions, your thoughts and ideas. And you're welcome to pick them up and discuss them between you, take them home and continue the conversation via email. The format is a very simple one. Like DiEM25's suggestion of a simple yet radical idea to democratize Europe, we have a simple yet radical idea to get you talking to each other in relation to the European New Deal. We gradually aim to get these responses online, and we could maybe call this a conversation if it is successful. Your voice will help us in knowing which questions we should be asking at this point. So let us know, what do you think, and which are the questions that we should be asking at this point? Thank you very much.
Allora, è possibile arrivare entro il 2019, quindi
when we get as far as 2019 working on a coordination of progressive left-wing forces on the basis of the European New Deal to fight against the right-wing policies, the policies of the right-wing xenophobic parties. Just to give you one figure, the first budget of President Trump, an increase of 10%, the defense budget, protection of the environment, minus 31%, education, a decrease of 14%, health care, decrease of 16%. And I'm telling you, because some people feel that Trump is against the establishment, is it possible to have a Europe which is against this system, this establishment? This is a question to Carlo Luis Monedero, who is one of the founders of Podemos. Could you come up here on stage?
E a Pascal Durand, che è un eurodeputato.
And we'd like to ask the same question to Pascal Durand, who is an MEP from the Greens, who has supported the campaign of Benoît Hamon. I'd like to invite Yanis Varoufakis to come up here on stage.
So I'll just be standing because it seems we don't have a chair. We've been rehearsing a lot, but of course, whenever you're amongst left-wingers, some little details are going to go wrong.
E anche quando portano 2 sedie invece di una, perché c'è già la scissione.
If they bring in 2 chairs instead of 1, is because they imagine that a split will soon be happening.
Tu citando
Juan Carlos, you said that the problem with socialism is that we have too much free spare time, but you use those afternoons off to actually create Podemos, putting together different experiences, including the one of Ada Colau and the experience of the PA and the historical left. How did you manage to do this?
Good evening. I'd like to say that today that we sort of we are celebrating some leaders of Europe. I wish to celebrate here Altiero Spinelli that taught us freedom. I think that we are at a time which is an historic point in time in Spain and in Europe as a whole. Well, there was something sort of magical which happened. Well, we overcame the crisis of 1929, which was the crisis which led to unity between the middle classes and the working classes. And then the Second Republic came about, which was very important. And it was so important as an achievement that there was a coup which, in a way, stopped this progress. The second important date is the date of the death of Franco. At that point, the middle classes and the working classes were joined together because they had a common purpose to defeat the Franco's dictatorship. The third date was 2011, the Indignados movement. Once again, we went out in the street, and we were all united, just middle classes and working classes, popular classes, with no specific party affiliations, because we had a common enemy, which was neoliberalism. And I think that the lesson we can learn from that is that in the capitalist system, we've always come across economic crisis. The strongest sectors always try to make more profit to the detriment of the majority, so they try to divide us, to fragment our unity. And the only chance that we have to retain our democracy is to be united. Well, what's the sort of lesson that we can draw from that? We have to sort of be together, united, setting aside what could divide us. Well, we have seen that in Latin America there was a possibility of changing the government, and there were 72 million which left a state of poverty. And this was possible because of the work done by the World Forum, which was an encounter of many people. We started bringing together some ideas whereby there was a possibility, an alternative project. And it was so the most important success of the liberal model was to try and convince us that there is no alternative. Well, there was in Bogota, someone said, well, I didn't know that it was possible to overcome the situation. Sometimes we have to think out of the box. We have to look at things and consider possible alternatives, because we must be convinced that we can do things differently. So that's why these kind of encounters are important. So what Yanis Varoufakis is doing with other comrades is very important, because he's trying to develop a message indicating very clearly that there is an alternative. And of course, our struggle is not going to be easy. Well, a few weeks ago, there were elections which were held in Ecuador, and the person that won the election will continue Correa's policy. But it was possible, however, for those that were in opposition to ask a number of questions of citizens in Ecuador about the measure to retain, to somehow check the economic policies. And let me finish with the last example of a very poor neighborhood of Caracas with a black mayor. And he was asking the citizens to vote for him. And there was a person that was asked, why are you going to vote for me? And he answered, no, I'm not going to sort of vote for you because I'm against the socialism. And if I vote for you, then socialism will deprive me of what I have. Well, and the answer of the mayor was, but you don't have any power, connection to power and electricity, so you're not going to be deprived of anything. And the answer that the person gave was, what about the possibility of winning a lottery? So let me conclude by saying that we are fighting against a ghost. So it's important that we identify the enemies of democracy. Podemos has 5 million voters and 71 members of parliament, because we were able to identify and single out our enemies. We were able to tell people that were sort of trying to ensure that we could not come up with an alternative. We were able to say that there is a different Europe. Well, my country has always been a sort of a country which was very optimistic about Europe, but was very ignorant about Europe. So, well, Europe sent a memorandum to change the constitution of my country to ensure that we would give priority to the payment of the debt with respect to the social dimension. So I think that there is something which is the basis of this encounter, which has been convened by the M25, that this Europe is the Europe of Altiero Spinelli that came into being because it was able to defeat fascism. It's Europe which grew facing a threat, which was the Soviet Union. Now, the struggle of yesterday are the rights that we enjoy today. And the current European Union must be something else than must not be the post-truth, but we must ensure that we will subscribe to the truth. We should not be defeated, because when we feel that there are no alternatives, and when we feel that it is possible to have a different Europe, an alternative Europe.
Che bello sentire parlare.
It's wonderful to hear the word lucha repeated so often, because in Italy the left for quite some time hasn't been speaking of lucha, of struggles, and then because they were afraid that people would not vote for them if they spoke of struggle, and in fact people stopped voting for them because they weren't using the word struggle. But in France too, the term struggle is being used again, and in the course of the electoral campaign, the youth have been playing an important part. That is normal in electoral campaigns, but it seems that Fillon is creating you some problem, because he's been creating a lot of jobs. He's hired his wife, 2 daughters, for more than €1 million. I don't think there are precedents of a right-wing man who creates so many jobs.
Bonsoir.
Good evening. We're going to switch from Spanish to French, so we'll have the European diversity, which is clearly shown tonight. Let me say why we have come here. We as environmentalists do not use too many words, but I'd like to briefly talk about the French experience, which is worthy of being looked at. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the European Greens, and I will also sort of on behalf of the French campaign to support Benoît Hamon. We're trying to respond to a different situation in France. I've come here not just because to sort of stress your personality. I've come here because I felt that you were very courageous, because at some point you decided that you would stand up and reject the Europe, which was pursuing a policy of austerity, increasing the pain of people that were deprived of the right to dignity and to a job. So it's unacceptable. And I have come here to say the same things, but I'd like to sort of put it in a different perspective. I feel very moved when I talk to you here in Rome, in Italy. Why do I feel very special? Because this is the date where we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Rome Treaty. In a few years, we will sort of recall the March on Rome, the time when the fascists sort of gave sort of fire to the home of my great-grandparent, and they were forced to take refuge in Nice, where many other who fought against fascism took shelter, and continued their struggle for peace and democracy. So I want to pay tribute to all those Spaniards, Italians, and from other countries who fought for Europe of solidarity, of brotherhood against fascists, all those who are going to sort of destroy us. So you gave us back our dignity, Yanis, and I will never forget this. I will never forget it. My grandfather, when he came to France, he came with his children. My mother was Italian. Well, the French fascists denied them French nationality, but they fought for France, and they were given a medal for their struggle, and they pursued their struggle against fascism, against bankers. There is no border in Europe. There is only one legitimacy of those that stand up for human dignity, for solidarity against those that wish to destroy it. That's my message to you tonight. Sorry for being so moved about it, but we should never forget the history, our history. I will never forget the history of the left. And I know that today the Greens are part and parcel of this struggle. But why? Because you're right. We need concrete answers. We must come up with immediate answers to our present situation. Well, people are suffering too much, so we can't take a medium or long-term perspective. There is a time when one must try and sort of implement a program, and then your program, Yanis, we should all be united in Europe. We must be working together. We must identify our common positions. Today we are in a dramatic situation. We're in a very difficult situation in Europe. We have over 27 people, 1 million people unemployed. There are people that have no access to the fundamental rights in the richest countries in the world. I don't want to go into details about our situation, but let me simply recall here that Edmond Rostand used to say, it's at night that you should believe in the light. It's a night of this Europe which is destroying our solidarity, that we have to believe in the light of what will become tomorrow, a Europe of solidarity. And I'm saying this thinking about Altiero Spinelli, with him in mind, and thinking about the people that during the war in France, when they were being arrested, deported, and tortured, had the strength to think about the future. And they said, well, one day we'll put an end to this world. We'll regain power. We will restore the solidarity of tomorrow. And they worked for social solidarity and security in the Italian Republic. So we should never be divided. We have different backgrounds, but we have a common purpose. We should all go for it, united, and so to restore the dignity of the humankind.
Yanis, su questo palco ci siamo riusciti.
Yanis, on the stage we managed to unite French, Greek, Spanish, Italians, and even British, because we've been waiting for a guest tonight.
I lived for 3 years in Texas. Do you know how close we all look as Europeans when you are in Texas? We are as if we belong to the same French or Italian village, whether we're Norwegian, Dutch, German, British, or Greek. So I think the whole of Europe should go to Texas for a year. Then we will be very united. No problems after that. Now, allow me to speak not as me. We have a wonderful person who has blessed Diem with his counsel, with his advice, with his presence. He is a member of Diem. His name is Ken Loach, the British director. Ken was meant to be here today, but he got very, very sick. And as he says in the note that he asked me to read to you on his behalf, dear friends, I'm sorry not to be with you this weekend. It is the English weather again. It struck again. When I spoke to him, his voice could not be heard, so I can assure you he really wanted to be here tonight. So let me convey his message nevertheless. This meeting could not be more urgent. We are all aware that the far right is on the march again. People feel unheard and left behind, ignored and alienated from politics. And they have good reason to feel that way. The right is using this to spread division and fake nationalism. The greater danger comes when big business sees this as the best way to defend its interests. There are signs that this could be starting to happen already. We have to suggest another way. It is clear that the center cannot hold, whether nominally center-left or center-right. Those parties have promoted a harsh and unrestrained version of capitalism, where the profits of big corporations go before all else. The European Union has been at the forefront of this project. Some think, and I agree with them, that this was an inevitable development for capitalism, and there is no going back to the days when social democrats could appear progressive. We need a new plan for Europe. Hear, hear. One that puts the interests of the people first. Jobs for all that pay wages to support the family in sustainable industries where the new technology is used to benefit us, not to exploit us. Homes, public services, care for the sick and the old. It is a very easy list to write. We also need a Europe that is not a self-serving trading bloc, but one where we look out to people across the world. We do not want to exploit cheap labor and resources in Asia, Africa, or South America. A global economy for us must equal global justice. It is, after all, one planet that we have to live on and sustain. Harsh competition between big corporations is killing this planet. The stakes could not be higher. We do have allies. The labor movement, once depicted as an old cart horse, still has its problems of leadership, but many want to fight back. Whatever its flaws, it is our essential strength. We're seeing positive signs across Europe. And Britain, Jeremy Corbyn and another DM member, John McDonnell, should be supported, not just by words, but with positive organizing help. The left is alive. I very much regret not being here to take part in this important meeting. With warmest good wishes and solidarity with the aims of DiEM25, Ken Loach.
La sinistra è viva anche qui.
So the left is alive in Italy too. But the problem is that you have 6 to 7 lefts that are alive in Italy. So perhaps what we need is to have at least one that remains alive, and then we will have time for new splinters. So the effort of DiEM25 perhaps could help Italy also a little bit. We will now leave the floor to the first members of DiEM25 and its volunteers. So I will now ask Svet Korvat to please come to the stage.
There from the very first moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a mic.
Okay,
Can
sure.
you see?
Sorry.
So first of all, I'm really glad to see that we have Spanish and French translation. Unfortunately, we still don't have Croatian translation here, so I will speak in my very bad Balkan English. But there are many people here from Slovenia, Serbia, and Croatia as well, and I'm really glad about this. What all people know is that 60 years ago, here in Rome, the Treaty of Rome was signed. What people usually don't know is that this treaty contained several blank white pages. And still it was signed by the leaders of Europe. Today, they gather in Europe to fill these white pages with the so-called Juncker plan, which will contain multiple speed Europe, variable geometries, and so on. And they're actually celebrating the death of Europe today. We at DM here are here to fill these blank pages with an unfinished project of Europe. This is the reason why 1 year ago we founded DM at the Volksbühne in Berlin. Why 1 year ago we were here in Rome. So people might ask us, so what have you done in 1 year? In 1 year DM, only in 1 year, we have members in every member state of the European Union today. We have members in states which are not part of the European Union anymore, like the UK. We have members in the states which will maybe never become part of the European Union, like Serbia or Turkey. And today, what happened today at the march is, I think, the best embodiment of what DM stands for. Our Serbian comrades from Serbia, because the Croatians couldn't come to Rome, were carrying a Croatian DM flag. And for me as someone who comes from Croatia, who was born in Yugoslavia, who lived during the days of war, this is what Europe should be about. So what we have today is not only members in every European state, member states, non-member states. DM launched 3 big campaigns. We launched one of the campaigns here in Rome, which is the campaign about transparency. We launched a campaign which is still taking place about refugees, and a campaign which is going against the European Central Bank and trying to release the so-called Greek files. We had many events from Amsterdam to Hamburg to Zagreb, Belgrade not yet, but we will come to Belgrade as well, and in many other parts of Europe. And let me say something and finish with this to come back what Comrade Monedero said. What DM is trying to do is to learn from all experiences, from all the struggles, as our French comrade said, and try to applicate it to Europe today. So if we go back to the last decade, we had at least 3 historical sequences. One historical sequence was represented by the World Social Forum, which started in Porto Alegre, with the great idea that all the progressives from the world, from Via Campesina to the Zapatistas, from the trade unions to the progressive Catholics, will gather once a year from Porto Alegre to Tunisia to Dakar. After this historical sequence, we had the historical sequence of 2011, from Puerta del Sol to Syntagma Square, from Bosnian plenums to Serbia, with the idea that we can achieve this kind of progressive idea only by direct democracy, horizontality. After this historical sequence where Podemos belongs, which is not part of history but the poetry of the future, we had the historical sequence of verticality, the political parties. What DM is trying to do is trying to connect all these levels of struggle, which means the format of the World Social Forum, which we miss today in Europe, then the horizontality and the verticality. And we are trying to do it from the local level, which is the reason why we have people here from Naples, which represent what we in DM call the network of rebel cities, Barcelona, Naples, but hopefully also very soon Zagreb or Belgrade. This is the reason why we have Belgrade here. We're trying to do it on the national level, which is the reason why we have the representatives of the Greens and Benoit Hamon here and Podemos and other Italian political parties. And what DM is trying to do is to combine all this together on the transnational level, because we can defeat, on the one hand, the Nationalist International, and on the other hand, the Austerity International, only by a new radical progressive movement. Thanks a lot. I don't know if I sit here, but...
Che cos'è DM?
What is DM in Belgrade? We'll ask one of the activists of DM, who, with other comrades, was a protagonist of the campaign against the privatization of the Belgrade waterfront. That they wanted to sell it to a corporation from the Arab Emirates. So they created a movement, starting with such a struggle. They created a movement which took inspiration from Podemos. Xenia, tell us about your experience.
My name is Xenia Radovanovic. I come from a country you probably know about. It's called Serbia. You heard. I'm from a city you probably heard of. It's called Belgrade. But I'm sure that the reason I'm here tonight you are all too familiar with. The initiative done at Belgrade Round, which I represent here, confronted a problem well known to people living across Europe and across the world. As many other citizens, we have lost our city. We have no influence on how it will develop, on what it will become, on where we'll live. The power of the economic and political elites is spiraling out of control. Their interest has become the only measure for the city, absorbing every available resource, turning it into a commodity, devastating public spaces and the environment, and affecting not only us, but also the future generations. But we in Belgrade said no more. We are determined to stop these processes, and we are determined to take back our city. And in the last couple of years, the citizens of Belgrade showed great solidarity. And we see this new sense of unity and readiness for action as the shapes of things to come. When we started making the waves, we also soon realized that we are in fact part of the huge tide of hope. A tide of hope we see in the M25, in Barcelona and Común, in Zagreb and Nash, and all the other movements that inspire us. Now we are sure that our problem recognizes no borders, as we are sure that our strength lies in solidarity. And our message is that we cannot give up, and we will continue the struggle to reclaim our cities across our countries and across our Europe. And we will win. Thank you.
Grazie Xenia.
Thank you, Xenia.
Grazie Xenia.
Thank you, Xenia. Please forgive our progressive government that bombed Belgrade as we wanted to export democracy. We did not all agree to that, but then at the end, everyone realized that at some point you're deprived of democracy. Even Massimo D'Alema is now recognizing it was a mistake to bomb Belgrade. Well, you can have second thoughts when you're a politician. But if you have made a mistake, which of bombing a city, maybe you shouldn't carry on with your political career. Very many years ago, over 10 years ago, I was asked to moderate a discussion on attack to the labor rights, where Pippo Civati, Ignazio Marino were being invited as speakers as well. There were all the representatives of the Italian left that usually sort of get together. But it was so crazy that should be discussing with these people, and he was the future mayor of Naples, De Magistris, Luigi De Magistris.
Di portarvi l'esperienza.
Good evening. Just in 5 minutes, I will try to tell you what we're doing in a city that from the deep south of Europe believes in the third way, not the Europe of Juncker, Renzi, Merkel and Hollande, meaning the Europe of the concentration of powers, of elites, the fiscal compact and austerity, not the Europe of the collateral damage, of the walls in Calais, of Salvini, Marine Le Pen and the images coming from Hungary, but the Europe that tried to let the voice of the people be heard. And I did that in a city that, when I came to power, to the administration, was full of debts. No one wanted to have anything to do with Naples. We were buried in waste, in Camorra, in the mafia. There was a serious depression affecting our city. And what did we do? We tried to work on the people, to let the voice of those who were never heard be heard for once. And so the people became the real protagonists of this experience. So the real secret of the experience of Naples as a safe shelter and as a rebel city because we kicked the mafia out of the municipality of Naples. And that is not a little achievement. The problem of Italy is the fact that corruption and the mafia are part of the political world. And we also try to be a city that could be a shelter, because we are not the citizens of Naples, we are the inhabitants of Naples, and Naples has no borders, and Naples is a city that practices solidarity because it considers that people are something precious. And so we tried to put people at the center and common goods at the center of our work. You may know that in Italy in 2011 a referendum was held where the people voted for water to be public. And Naples is the only city in Italy that implemented the referendum on public water. And again, on common goods, on the land, on the needs of the people, on walking down in the streets and talking to people and putting yourselves into question, and have the courage to do all this, as Yanis Varoufakis said earlier. So I think we should really reverse what the main component of neoliberal policies was. The strength of neoliberalism was the idea of money as the only way to develop your life. Development as the subjugation of nature. Progress as the destruction of common goods. We must reverse all this. The real progress is what the Article 3 of the Italian Constitution says. It is the task of the Italian Republic to remove the barriers that hinder the development of the human person. The human person is, number one, solidarity. And we will never win the fight against terrorism by locking ourselves into our homes. In Naples, if anyone tries to build walls and fences, the municipality of Naples, even though it has no money, is going to buy the tools to destroy that fence. And we managed to achieve all this in Naples completely on our own. I am not a member of any political party. I am here today because I believe that in Europe we must build a huge movement of popular liberation by building committees, movements, struggles, from the no-tab struggle to the struggles against for green resources and all of that. But not just to say no, but to say yes to a Europe of social justice, yes to a Europe that puts collective property first, not private property first. In our town, there are so many young people who seize abandoned spaces and they regenerate them. And they create an economy from below. And then in other cities you have mayors who call the cops to evict the young people when they do so. We do the opposite. We believe that this is the real popular wealth and popular richness. Now, the Italian government made a decree on urban security saying that the mayors should become new cops, basically. But I am doing the exact opposite. I am trying to give power to those who want to regenerate abandoned areas to actually do so. Mayors will never be the actors of repression, and Naples will be a rebel city also to the government decrees on security and immigration. You cannot have migrants working for free. That is a shame. Up with revolution and up with the truth.
Grazie Luigi.
Thank you, Luigi. I must say I'm very proud because we do have young people that sort of occupy vacant spaces and then use them very effectively. But we have a mayor that sort of asks them to leave such spaces and evicts them. He's an artist and is a member of parliament of Barcelona Común. Ada Colau wanted to be with us today, but she can't because she's expecting a baby. We have with us Marcelo Exposito tonight.
Buenas noches, Roma. Buenas noches.
Good evening, Rome. Good evening, Italy. Good evening, Europe. I'd like to convey you the greetings of Barcelona, the rebel city, a feminist city, city which is the shelter of Southern Europe. Shelter city of Southern Europe. I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to thank Diem for the honor to participate to the presentation of your program for Europe. I'd like to welcome Yanis and thank him for representing the dignity of Southern Europe against the Troika, representing all of us. I'd like to greet the progressive forces of Europe. I'd like to greet the Spanish brothers of Podemos and the mayor of Naples and the rebel cities of Southern Europe. Today we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the signature of the Treaties of Rome. For many days we have heard about the celebrations that were taking place and how the European bureaucracies and European leaders celebrate the success of Europe. The King of Spain told us that Europe is a history of success. And a number of Spanish politicians repeat the same message, but they're all very worried about the growth of populism. The elites, which somehow seem to be focusing on economic agreements, Bertolt Brecht had expressed a challenge. If you don't like your people, then just leave the power from the people, take the power away from the people. But we want to recall here the Europe of Alexandros Grigoropoulos that was killed by the corrupted government of Karamanlis, and Carlo Giuliani was killed by the corrupted government of Berlusconi. Today we must celebrate the Europe of Messina and of Genoa and Lampedusa, Europe with a massive protest against austerity in Greece in 2008, the protests in Spain in 2011, and the protests in Portugal in 2013. We also have criticized the Maastricht Treaty, but today we must ensure that we prevent the disintegration of the European Union. Well, Europe must fight against exploitation and must fight for democracy. There is no future for our peoples outside an integrated Europe. We cannot allow a Europe of two-speed Europe, Europe which is based on division between the wealthy states and the poor states of Europe. Today we are here not just to celebrate, but we are here to demonstrate and saying that we must create a transnational progressive political alliances which will enable Europe to overcome the crisis with more democracy. It's a huge challenge. It's almost impossible to take it, but it's a question of life and death for the future of the European peoples. Our alliance has no future if we only consider the possibility of coalitions between political parties. Of course, our parties may be necessary, but the sort of alliance which is required to build this new Europe, it's an alliance between social movements and parties, and we have to create possibilities to give more power to the social majority that feels deprived of its own sovereignty, that is afraid but has expressed its indignation. Well, in Spain, they were able to bring about change. Sovereignty must be given back to the peoples of Europe, and especially to these people from the southern part of Europe. And this is going to be one of the most difficult challenges that we have to face. We have to give back to the people the right to decide for themselves. And at the same time, we have to build a common European space. The new policy must consider clever ways of building up transnational alliances on monetary sovereignty. There won't be any constituent progress in Europe unless we do not include, the political parties. So the cities will be also a key in the momentum of this movement, especially the rebel cities of the South, and the empowerment of the ordinary people were the ways in which we were able to win in Spain the government of Barcelona, of Madrid, of Cadiz, of Santiago and Ferrol, Zaragoza, Valencia, the cities that I wish to greet and express our sort of welcome from Rome. Barcelona, Lesbos, Lampedusa, and Paris in September 2015 published a letter signed "We, the Cities of Europe." This letter contained a paragraph which is worth mentioning here tonight. We are responsible of the ideas that basically was built after the defeat of fascism to ensure a future of peace, prosperity of the future generations. There were many forces involved in facing up the challenges. They were able. And I'd like to hug you all and say, yes, we can. Yes, we can do that.
L'8 marzo le donne.
On the 8th of March, women in Italy, in Europe and the world took to the streets to claim for their rights. In Europe, where women earn about 30% less than men, but that's also thanks to neoliberal policies. Now this gap is reducing because governments are working hard to make sure that also men will earn less. But we still have European countries where women need to take to the streets to defend the right to abortion. That is what happened in Poland, where thousands of women took to the streets. Amongst them were the activists of Razem. Razem is a new political force that was directly inspired by Podemos. And Agnieszka, who's also a member of DiEM, will be telling us more about that.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here tonight, and there are three main reasons for which I will say what I'm going to say. Firstly, I came from Poland. Secondly, I'm a woman and a feminist. And thirdly, I come from the left-wing, progressive, democratic, women-oriented party called Razem. And since the last year in Poland was, for me, it was defined by the unprecedented siege on women's rights, I feel obliged to share our experience of initiating and organizing the Black Protest, the mass the mass wave of women protest that occurred in our country. But besides those my individual reasons, there is one more important and political reason for sharing that experience. I believe that equal women's rights and women equal participation in power and in politics needs to be not only included, but put in the very heart, in the very center of political agenda of new pan-European movement like DM. And it should be reflected in both program, policies, and the organization of DM, whichever way it will be developed. By including women's agenda into political programs, I do not mean to write one chapter on women issues. I mean to take a stance with writing every chapter on any other issues in a gender-sensitive way, to take into account the women agenda perspective, to, for example, when preparing policies on refugees, to take into account the very specific, very particular situation of women refugees. When writing about job insecurity, to take into account the very particular, usually more severe consequences of job instability for women. On the organization level, building the left-wing pan-European movement women-oriented, like DM, we need to remember of making sure that women are engaged and represented in its institutional and organizational bodies. We have some experiences in RASM that we can share regarding that issue, since we, and I'm proud to say that we accomplished to build an organization that on every level, in every governing body, has equal gender representation, and it's based on gender parity rule. But during that process of building that organization, we've learned that we have to constantly work on that. We have to constantly make sure that this equality is not only formal, but is really authentically, practically performed. And to achieve the goal of making women's agenda on the very core of policy, of left-wing policy, we need to also politicize the women's rights movements. We need to not only see women's rights issues as political, but we also need to convince the general public that women's rights, women's agenda, women's liberties are political issues. And how we can do that? I don't know the complete answer, but I know that we can learn of the experience of black protest, that we can learn some lessons from that. Firstly, we should treat the women's rights movement as if it already was being politicized. We need to put it in every political debate. We need to put it in every program, in every chapter, in every paper, and treat it as a real political issue. Secondly, we need to create as simple and as easy and as inclusive method of reaching the general public as possible. Despite the very subtle academic differences amongst the left-wing organizations, we need to be inclusive. We need to use very simple language and easy instruments like social media, hashtags. We need to have a courage not to be afraid of infantilizations of our agenda. To wrap it up, first we need to convince the broad audience to our cause, and then we will be able to educate them, not the other way around. So I'm here with strong belief and a strong hope that those issues will be addressed by DM, because this is one of the issues that we need to address on the European level, because if you want, no country on its own will be able to accomplish that. Thank you.
Grazie Agnieszka. Oh, ha ragione Barbara.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Barbara D'Urso is right. Women from the eastern countries are very good, they're very smart. Marta Fana spoke about the need to reduce working hours. The Green New Deal talks about that. We work more than a farmer in the 12th century, so there is a need for some form of support, income support. Some people are saying this in Parliament. Italian left, Sinistra Italiana, is saying it, and we have our secretary, Nicola Fratoianni, with us. Renzi said that you don't need income support, but you need citizenship income, a job which is work free of charge, where you're not being paid. Today, they celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Treaties of Rome. We did not participate in their celebration because we knew that there was very little we had to rejoice about. We knew that in that signature there wasn't any Europe that we are striving for, of common goods, of solidarity, that the signature of the treaties was the end of this Europe. So we did not participate in this celebration, but that is not enough. It's not enough for us to feel sort of somehow encouraged. We're not ready. We were too few. We were not sufficiently determined. So we were not power. We had no power. We need to have strength to change this Europe, which is not the Europe we want to have. To gain more power, we have to consider a number of things. The very first thing we need is to make sure that we do not sort of feel afraid, frightened. Well, there could be many ways of frightening us. People tell us, well, but faced with barbarism and nationalism and fascism, you need a huge alliance, an alliance based on responsibility. So we have to bring together people from the left, from the right, responsible people to stop barbarism. Well, the first thing we need to understand is that that is not what it should be done. You can't stop barbarism by enacting the Jobs Act, as we've done here in Italy, which deprives workers of rights, and not with the security measures of Orlando and Minniti. You do not fight poverty, but you fight against the poor and the marginalized, and instead of fighting drug addiction, you fight against addicts. You do not sort of fight barbarism like the mayor of Ventimiglia, that sort of when people who help migrants are being fined by the municipalities. So that's the first thing we need to understand. Then there is something else that we need. There is another proposal that we should put forward. What we listened to tonight, the proposal about the European New Deal and the many things that were shared by comrades here. This is the first step for our project. We have to try and sort of come up with a common discourse. We have to say something which we have forgotten in this continent, with fewer people that seem to work harder and harder, too many people that have lost their job. We have to sort of focus on redistribution of wealth, of income, redistribute work. This is a very modern, radical approach, which is based on common sense. So we have to bring together our own ideas, and at the end of the day, we have to come up with a language, a common language, and a common policy. The capacity to work together to reconstruct a new path, which is a common path. That is how I understand the proposal which was put forward tonight. And I'd like to thank Diem for this opportunity, for this space which has been opened, the convergence, which was mentioned by our Spanish comrades that have worked on it, and we should learn from them so that we could have a convergence here in Italy, that we bring together the politicians, the civil society, new institutions. This is possible. Let's try and do it. I don't know whether we'll be ready by 2019, but we must get started today or else we'll never be ready. And the Europe we advocate and wish to achieve will never get it, and we'll be faced with a Europe which will no longer exist. It will be the victory of fascism and nationalism. As our comrades for Podemos say, si se puede. Let's try and do it.
Allora, adesso cambiamo un attimo scenario e passiamo all'Italia.
Now let us change scenario a little bit. Italy is now at the forefront of the crisis because the reforms of Italian technocrats have been focusing in particular on the labor market, saying we needed a labor market that was more flexible in the sense that they wanted to attack workers' rights. When the Troika met, they must have realized that the decline of Greece at the world level happened after Greeks had decided to abolish slavery. Greece initially exported democracy in the world, and they abolished slavery, and that was when their decline began. And so the Troika thought, okay, well, we need slavery back in place, but of course this is not going to be so easy to implement, so we need some advanced forms in order to repropose it. And Italy has been at the center of this entire operation. In Italy, youth unemployment is twice as high than in other European countries, and there are many saying in Italy that the only way out of this situation is by getting out of the European Union. We believe instead that the only way out of this situation is by staying together. And so I will now ask our Italian guests to come to the podium, to come and join us here. Now, of course, please bring your chairs with you, and we will now listen to Anna Falcone, who was the leader of the No Committee for the Constitutional Referendum in Italy. And then the co-chair of the European Green, Monica Frassoni. The Secretary of Rifondazione Comunista, Paolo Ferrero. Lish Lane, MEP of Possibile. Gianmarco De Pieri, Civic Coalition Bologna. And Eleonora Forenza, Alta Europa con Tsipras. So I guess that the choreography wanted you guys to be dancing some ballet moves or something like that. I am trying to make the situation a little bit more spicy, so all I can do is to please ask you guys to pass the mic on. You have been listening to what has been said so far. Your parties or political forces are already supporting proposals that probably are the same ones as Diem and other ones that could expand Diem's proposal. So my question for you is, do you believe that there is a space for the convergence of progressive forces in Europe to reverse austerity? Gianmarco. Well, I think that today we did something important, and that there is we are building politics for Europe here rather than in the Campidoglio where the EU leaders met. And I am saying this because this means that we have a huge responsibility. At the end of in a moment in which the European project is coming close to its end, the only possible answer for us is to take ownership over that project. And DiEM is an attempt to do this, to accumulate the forces we need, to accumulate the consensus we need, and also to accumulate the strength we need, because if we don't build up a strength that can reverse the power balance so that we can reverse the end of the European project, I am afraid that we will end up just with a storytelling operation. So what could the role of a civic coalition at the municipal level like mine could play? Well, perhaps one of the things that created the crisis of the European project is the fact that the only way that the path to get to Europe that we chose so far was the national one. We started from the national level to get to the European level. But perhaps we must start from a new level, from that of cities, for example, Valencia, Madrid, Naples. And we are trying to do this in Italy too, the local project, the federation of local projects, the networking between society and the political level. The fact that we should all declare as a public act that our cities want to be the shelter for migrants. The fact that in our cities abandoned spaces can become spaces where we create common experiences rather than spaces that are only left there for financial speculation. Cities where we say that we want to reverse the fiscal compact from below. So clearly cities can be a space of experimentation. Now in France, Germany and Italy, I don't know about Spain, but there is a common idiom in these countries saying that the air you breathe you can breathe in a city makes you free. And I think that the air that you can breathe in certain European cities really can make us strong.
Elish, lei, nero parlamentare di Possibile.
Elish.
I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank DiEM for this invitation, this most valuable contribution to the debate. I'm lucky, and like Pascal, because we work in the European Parliament. We feel European when we see that we share our struggle, and the approach which was mentioned tonight is very convincing, a concrete approach, very effective. We placed a great deal of emphasis in Italy on the idea that we should sort of join forces with society at large on a concrete project, a project which is shared, that we can build together, which tries to sort of create a major mobilization of everyone on this. It's the only way to send a signal to the establishment that gathered today, and also to defeat national egoisms. So it's really no use to talk about sovereignty in a globalized world. You have to give back sovereignty to the citizens. That is what we need to do when we're faced with global European challenges that cannot be addressed in the national confines. So he mentioned many challenges. Migration challenge, 6 member countries out of 28 that address the request for asylum that come from all over the world. And then you have the agreement which was signed with Turkey to limit the sending back of refugees, but there are no way out for people that flee wars. So that's the only thing on which 28 governments can come to an agreement, is outsourcing our responsibility and our protection of our borders. Many mentioned Altiero Spinelli tonight, but I'd like to quote also Ursula Hirschman, because our founding fathers and our founding mothers did not have this Europe in mind. We have to sort of provide the missing pieces of the puzzle of Europe, we have to work for the full democratization of Europe. But before we do that, we have to ensure that we're all engaged in a common struggle. In my view, the first struggle would be that about fiscal justice. We did not sort of build Europe to see sort of fierce fiscal competition between the various member countries, which has a price of 1,000 billion per year. So we could start joining forces on this front, because this is very much related to the crucial issue that we have to address, which is to fight against inequalities and how we should redistribute wealth which is being created by technologies. Let me conclude with just one last comment. You have used an expression, a form of words, the Nationalist International. I was a few time ago with many other comrades belonging to different movements, and I was kind of saying it's paradoxical that nationalists are moving as if they were a global front, and they use the same language of hate. We must do the same thing, but we should do it better. We must show that we have common struggles. We can pursue them all together to build what is missing in Europe and to come up with a Europe with a greater measure of dignity and greater opportunities for the future generation. Thank you.
Paolo Ferrero, segretario di
Paolo Ferrero, National Secretary of Rifondazione Comunista. Good evening to you all, and thanks to Diem for the invitation. I think that we must give a positive answer to the two questions raised. Do we need a European New Deal? Yes, we do, because neoliberal policies are destroying the European social model, and they are negatively impacting the living conditions for millions of Europeans. As a response to all that, you have the nationalist and racist reaction, and the success of the racist and of the nationalist is due to neoliberal policies. Matteo Renzi is producing Matteo Salvini. This is the drama, and this is why we need a third way. And the third way, I would define it in the following terms. We need to break away with the idea that there is no money, because the dominant idea is that there is no money. There's no money for healthcare, no money for education, no money for labor. And given that there is no money, the right wing says, how come then you find money for migrants? Our people should come first. We should say instead something very simple. It is not true that there is no money. The money is there because the ECB makes a quantitative easing for European banks, and for banks money is always there, and the rich are becoming richer, and so perhaps the problem is that money is out there and someone has too much money. We must redistribute wealth and use it for a new deal. Number one. Number two, in order to be strong enough to build a new deal, saying it, asking for it, it's not enough if we keep being divided, because division is what is making our enemy strong. So I think something very simple. I am a communist. I am here with other comrades, friends who perhaps would not call themselves communists. They would call themselves environmentalists, liberal left-wingers, socialists. I don't care. Sometimes I listen to what the Pope says, and I think that he's on the same side as myself, because he's speaking a language, a new humanism language, against the rational, the philosophy of profit. I think that we should try and bring together the different political traditions and the different cultural, social and political experiences, and building with no hierarchies a collective public space from below of the people, people against neoliberalism. I think that is what we need to do in Italy. And to my friends of Possibile, and to my friends of Sinistra Italiana, all I say is that we have no more time left. Time is over. We need to start discussing tomorrow morning of how to come up with a program, how to come up with a common politics, not for those who are already party members, but for the vast majority of people who want to change things, and they are members of no organization, of no political party. And I think that's the same thing we need to do at the European level. I am a member of the Party of the European Left. We have the Green, there is Podemos. We need to build a dialogue, an exchange, and build a coalition, an anti-militarist from below coalition in Italy, but also in Europe.
Grazie, Paolo.
Thank you, Paolo. It might be a nice slogan for the Italian left. Better late than never. So we can have T-shirts with better late than never. Monica Frassone, who's a co-chairperson of the European Greens. Well, let's work together. So thank you for your invitation and for this opportunity. I'm very happy to be here for two reasons. First of all, because today it's the 25th of March. But unlike your reaction, I feel that 25th of March is very important. Is important for me because I'm involved in politics, because I wanted to be engaged in policy. I met Altiero Spinelli in 1984, and I joined the Federalist movement of Florence, and I saw this old man with a white beard. Was full of energy. Not only did he have charisma, he had a tremendous amount of energy, and I sort of wondered, who the hell is he? And I think that the contribution given by Altiero Spinelli, not just as an Italian, but as a European, was to say, well, the fight is, the struggle is very difficult. I've been defeated on many occasions, but I carry on. And I will have other people join me to carry on this fight. And I think that today we shouldn't just express our sort of conflict, our opposition against the governments of the representatives of governments that are signing on Capitol Hill. The European Greens signed the establishment of their party at the Capitol in the hall of the Lupa, because we felt that it was a great sort of symbol. But we have to sort of follow the direction which was mentioned by many of you, and which I feel is very convincing. But it's very difficult to do that in Italy. When we are referring about possible horizontal and vertical convergence, when we talk about sort of politicians that join with representatives of civil society, we know that in Italy this is very difficult. There's a lot of mistrust because I have my own association and you build a party even though we follow the same course, if you like. So and I think that this sort of project, which is very European and very significant that we are sharing, should be considering also the problems that we will be up against in doing it. I'd like to thank Yanis for the opportunity that he has given us. We should, all of us, try to speak more about Europe in Italy. This is not being done. Almost never do we do that, because when people start talking about Europe in Italy, people seem to be bored and people don't seem to follow it. If we manage to talk about Europe, a different Europe, the one that we want to build, I think we might sort of get a greater political support and consensus. The Austrian and the Dutch example show quite clearly that when there is an alternative, when the alternative is based on courage and it's supranational to some extent, well, you get sort of the support and people understand what you say. I think whatever we'll be able to come up with, be it convergence or something else, it needs to be more European, or else we won't be able to succeed. So much so that one of the problems which I feel we have to consider is that part of the left seems to be somewhat inclined to go along with nationalist approach. But we have to speak a very clear language, and we must try and once again gain a consensus that we're not having right now in Italy. I'd like to say something about the proposal. Yanis talked about the European New Deal. We talk about the Green New Deal, and there is a lot of that unites us, but we do not have sufficient consensus to make people understand that when we talk about work, we're talking about changing the energy system. We talk about fighting against climate change, fighting against the pollution and the very poor quality of life in many of our cities. If we manage to do both, to be more European-minded and more sort of focused on a policy proposal which is not a defensive one, but it is also very sort of fascinating proposal that we might be convincing and win the European elections of 2019 and 2018. Why not? Thank you. Italy said no to neoliberal policies on the 4th of December, voting against the constitutional reforms because Matteo Renzi said, well, if I lose, I'll go back home, I'll step down. Well, we tried to make life easier for him, but then he decided that he didn't want to retire because at 42, because of the Jobs Act, he couldn't get a job. But Anna Falcone will pursue her commitment with for the referendum.
Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to Varoufakis and to the DM movement for the efforts in trying to build a perspective of dialogue and a constructive perspective for the benefit of all European citizens in order to create that wider democratic horizon compared to what we see in our own countries. I am here to represent an experience based on courage. The time of courage in Italy began with the experience of the referendum committee, because our committee was created by a group of citizens who had very few resources. But we decided, nevertheless, to oppose a constitutional reform that was sold as the idea that the problem of Italy was that its constitution was too old. Our response was that the constitution was not too old, and that the problem was that that constitution was never implemented. We worked tirelessly to engage Italian citizens. It was a very difficult battle because the language of the reform was unreadable, basically. And in the course of time, we realized that Italian people wanted to understand and what the reform was about. Not only did they want to understand it, but they understood it so well that they voted no. And they recognized one another around our constitution. The Italian constitution is based not only on the rights of people, sovereignty, labor and participation are the direct result of Article 1 of our Constitution. Italy is a democratic republic founded on labor, where labor is the basis of social cohesion. Social participation is at the core of democracy, and without participation and democracy you can have no sovereignty. We are aware of the huge responsibility we have on our shoulders. We have more than 700 committees that were created at the Italian level during the campaign, and the committees decided to continue working even after the referendum. We are not a political party. We will not become a political force. We have very diverse experiences and backgrounds, but we have one common denominator, and that is the fact that we have a model, we have a democratic model which we believe was never implemented. And the fundamental rights that are protected by our Constitution, participation, sustainable development, they must be, we believe that those things cannot be achieved just at the national level. We need a Europe, we need a Europe for citizens. Let me just read out some words to you. And here we have a text saying that the Union fights social exclusion, it promotes social justice, equality between men and women, it protects the rights of children, it promotes social cohesion and solidarity between member states. It respects the diversity, its diversity, and it protects its cultural heritage. And again, the Union builds an internal market, but it will work for a sustainable development based on a stability of prices, on a social economy, on a social market economy, whose aim is full employment and social progress and the protection of the environment. This is Article 3 of the Treaty on the European Union. How many of us have invoked Article 3 while Greece was being destroyed? How many of us called for the implementation of Article 3, fundamental principles on which the Union is based, when all Mediterranean countries, Italy, Spain, were asking that those rules were enshrined in our Constitution, and when other countries were deprived of their best talents? No one did this, because we too very often use very fascinating slogans, but we don't really read the treaties. We don't look at the weapons that are already out there and that we could use at the level of European institutions in order for change to begin right now. Of course, those are weak weapons, and so we need a Unitarian perspective that should be based on an exercise of sovereignty, which could be the first act of constitutional sovereignty of the European citizens. We know that there was a constitutional process that failed because they spoke of a constitutional treaty, but that was not a constitution. The Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union included certain new rights, but particularly when it came to social rights, they were basically not even mentioning those protections that instead exist in our national constitution, in many of our national constitutions. perhaps we should start again by building a process of the people who can meet in order to create a constitution on the rights of European citizens, because we need a new perspective for a new European renaissance, so that European citizens can do what people did in Italy, having a chance to cast their vote in order, through a referendum, to change things. So let us put together and write that constitution that could be the democratic program of all and not just the platform of some political force.
Anna, dici quanti...
Anna, how many of us have invoked Article 3 when Greece was being attacked with the austerity policies? Well, it was in those very years that the Altra Europa with Tsipras came into being. I'd like to thank DM for the invitation and for the proposal that was just put forward here. I'll start with the outcome of these celebrations of the 60th anniversary of the treaties of Rome. Basically, they have clearly stated that there is a multi-speed Europe. They change speed, but they go to the wrong direction. So our task is to see how can we change the course of this Europe, and we should take the lowest level at the European when it comes to Europe. So the denial of rights, which occurs every day at our borders, an agreement such as the agreement between the European Union and Turkey, and the billions which were given to the reactionary government or Erdogan to outsource the border protection. The agreement which is about to be finalized with Libya, where the Italian government has very major responsibilities, that the 5,000 deaths in the Mediterranean should result into the disintegration of the European project, and we should sort of take ownership of that project ourselves. And what Yanis said at the beginning was wonderful. Our Europe is a Europe without borders. Well, as I'm a feminist, I feel it easier to think in terms of Europe without borders. And I'd like to mention, and the whole world is my motherland. And I think this should be the manifesto of DM as well. I think that the strength of the global feminist movement, the women movement, has in Europe. So, well, the external borders become internal borders. Decree that security means freedom. Well, we're seeing for ourselves the implications of security is freedom, and we see that very clearly in the city of Rome, where a center which was at the heart of the struggle for the referendum for water as a meeting has been evicted as well, and this was a very point of reference for people working in the drama and performances. And we've seen that our constitutional right to demonstrate freely has been denied. 180 people were kept in an identification center by the law enforcement here in Rome, so that their right to demonstrate freely was denied. So I think that the first freedom we should reclaim is that of freedom to protest and to. I think we can pursue our project and the program which was proposed by DM. But that's not enough. It's not enough to write wonderful programs and as we sit around the table. We have to reconstruct a European agenda of conflicts and movements. The European peoples are developed in the freedom for liberation from the policies of austerity. So we have to bring together different ways of being engaged in politics, different policies, self-government experiences which have been carried out by the trade unions, a different dialogue between political parties and civil society that should be established. So we have to rebuild the social bloc. We have to restore the unity between what has been divided by neoliberalism. And I think that this is the sort of unity that we must build. It takes courage to learn from your own mistakes. That's the unity that we have to restore, that of a social bloc, and the European peoples that must be free from the austerity policies. We shouldn't sort of repeat the mistakes of the past. The European socialists have approved the Jobs Act in Italy, and they approved the Loi du Travail in France. They voted the Canadian-European trade agreement at the European Parliament. They are working to convert the fiscal compact from intergovernmental agreement into community agreement. So I think we should be courageous enough and avoid making the mistakes we've made in the past.
Thank you, Eleonora. And once again, they told us that we need to wait some time before judging the effects of the Jobs Act on the young unemployed. Let us just wait for another 10 years, and we'll see that. And the young unemployed will be not that young anymore. And we wish to thank all of you who were here today. There were many organizations and associations that participated to tonight's event. And then really we don't believe in the myth of the separation between the civil society and political parties, given that, for example, political parties in Italy are full of people that come from the experience of civil society. So we just wish to thank Transform Greenpeace, Famiglia Arcobaleno, French Greens, ANPI, the movement Non Una Di Meno, Social Center La Strada, Mappers Catalunya, Da Sud, and I hope that I didn't forget anyone else. So I ask for the conclusions of tonight. Once again, Yanis Varoufakis and Lorenzo Marzilli.
Oscar Wilde once said that socialism meetings are too long. Let's prove him wrong. So I'll be as brief as I can. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a plan. At least Diem does. We call it the European New Deal. It may be good, bad, indifferent, but at least it's a solid, comprehensive plan. I'm going to do a Merkel on you now. Merkel, Angela, you know her, right? When we were elected in January 2015, in one of the first meetings, she gave us the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding of Greece, the austerity proposals and the privatization, and said, okay, take it and cross out the bits you don't like and replace them with things you want, which is fine. We did it. What happened afterwards is another story, but we did it. I'm going to do a Merkel on you. I'm going to invite you to take the European New Deal, download it from our website, and cross out the bits you don't like, add the bits you want to add, and let's meet again and continue to talk to one another between now and the 25th of May, in Berlin, in the Volksbühne, where DiEM25 began. Let's have a conversation based on policies, based on what we must do, and as long as we converge on what must be done, I have no doubt that we will find a way of doing it together. Let's take stock in Berlin. Before that, however, I'm going to issue a warning. We have a plan, but as a famous American boxer once said, they all have a plan until I punch them in the nose. It is not good enough to have a plan. It is not even good enough to be elected with a plan. Do you know what the only thing that can sustain a punch in the nose is? It is that which we did not have in Greece in 2015. It is unity amongst ourselves. Let's have a plan. Let's unify to win government everywhere in Europe to implement it. And then let's find a way of avoiding the darkness in our own souls that can render each one of us a potential liability for the movement. Thank you.
Ma dobbiamo fare di più di questo e io passerò adesso all'italiano.
Il tempo è ora. Che siamo stati qua, abbiamo parlato, ci siamo incontrati, abbiamo visto che condividiamo la maggior parte delle idee, delle proposte che questa sera sono state presentate. Non possiamo però permetterci di continuare ad incontrarci per scoprire che condividiamo gran parte delle proposte che presentiamo in serata dopo serata dopo serata. Abbiamo due appuntamenti cruciali. Il primo è quello del 2019, delle prossime elezioni politiche europee, e dentro quella data dovrà darsi uno schieramento alternativo all'establishment e ai nazionalismi, unito, con coraggio e con determinazione di vincere e di cambiare questa Europa per davvero. E questo significa che dobbiamo lavorare ora, che dobbiamo arrivare al 2018 avendo questa proposta pronta per essere lanciata. Nel 2018 ci saranno anche le elezioni in Italia e a me farebbe molto piacere come cittadino italiano di avere uno schieramento italiano che io possa votare, perché al momento non ce l'ho. Noi siamo a disposizione non per fare l'ennesimo gruppo europeo italiano, ma per dare una infrastruttura che sia in grado di unire e di facilitare questo processo di confluenza a livello europeo e a livello italiano. Lo faremo nei prossimi mesi a Berlino il 25 maggio con tutta una serie di appuntamenti europei. Ci mettiamo a disposizione a farlo assieme in Italia attraverso tanti incontri come questo in giro per il Paese per costruire assieme questo spazio italiano ed europeo in cui poter tornare a credere e anche da poter tornare a votare. Il tempo è ora ed è il tempo del coraggio, quindi andiamo a lavorare. La cosa più importante che ogni anno mi dimentico.
The most important thing that I keep forgetting every year, I did the same thing last year. I need to call someone very special onto the stage, which is the political director of tonight, but also the director of tonight, but also the political director of this entire operation. And this is Berardo Carboni. Well, thank you all, and if you're not too tired, you're all invited to the Neurots, the Kurdish celebration that is happening now in a social center in Testaccio, a center that is at risk of being evicted, so I would ask all of you to go there and support the Kurds.